Well, hello and welcome to the Pen to Publish podcast from the two Alexas. If you're penning and publishing or even just planning to pen and publish, you're in the right place. We have an exciting update for all listeners of the Pen to Publish podcast, and that is our brand new shiny website. For all things show notes and guest interview information, please visit www.thepentopublishpodcast.com. I'm Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter and independent publisher, and
I'm Alexa Tewkesbury, author, editor and proofreader. You can never have too many Alexas. We love getting feedback, so do please review and subscribe. And we also have a group full of like-minded writers, which you can join over on Facebook and get your writing results happening. It's called the Writers Refinery, and the link will be in the show notes that accompany these podcasts. So let's get started.
Hello, lovely listeners of the podcast. We are now on episode 5 today, and we're going to be talking about all other forms of how you can publish your book. This includes ebooks and audiobooks, and I guess podcasts as well, but I'll talk about that option right at the end. Now, warning alert, I'm going to get a bit nerdy in this episode, or rather pedantic with terminology, but hey, that's what you listen to us. That's why you listen to us, right? So that you're properly informed.
I mean, let's face it, we did a whole episode in the last series, I believe, on terms used within publishing. So you know we like to get into our terminology.
Yeah, and I think this one in particular is very confusing because it's a bit like the Hoover vacuum cleaner analogy. And I think it's really important that people understand exactly what they're talking about when it comes to other forms of books. So I'm just going to take some time to explain what I mean by ebooks. Because just like we had with the term font, ebooks have become muddled with its meaning. So let's make sure we properly defined what ebook means. Ebook means electronic book. It doesn't exclusively mean Kindle edition, although that is one type of ebook. And I don't know if you noticed, I called it Kindle edition and not Kindle, because people refer to a Kindle edition as a Kindle book, but it's not. A Kindle is the device that you read it on, and a Kindle edition is what your book is. Now, I told you we were going to get a bit nerdy.
Yeah, but accurate is another word. I like the word accurate.
Exactly. Now, electronic books by definition means that they're delivered to the end user or reader in a way that can be sent over the internet and usually read on some kind of device. This device can be anything from a computer, a smartphone or tablet, or an iPad, obviously, or any of the specific devices that reads ebooks. Now, Kindles have become synonymous with ebooks, as they are probably the most popular devices that people read them on. However, ebooks aren't limited to Kindle editions, and that's what I'm going to explain in this episode. So there are 3 ways an ebook can be made, or rather converted into. So you've got your written book that you may or may not have published, but for this episode, let's assume your book has been published in a physical paper format. You now have 3 options on how to create your ebook version, and which one you choose depends on how you want your end reader to download them. So the first is the simplest, and that is just a common PDF. Now, I'm going to assume you know what a PDF means, but for those that don't, and I did say we're having a nerdy episode, it's portable document format, which, you know, is quite apt actually. And it's like a stapled down version of your book. People can't easily edit or change a PDF, which of course is totally unlike the highly unstable Word or Pages version. If you create a PDF version of your book, I usually encourage my authors to include the front cover on this as well, and have a special back page that includes links on how they can get hold of the physical version. You can then sell this version of your PDF of your book directly from your website, and you can charge whatever you want, usually at a discounted price of your physical book. You can't sell a PDF version of your book on Amazon, but more about that in a bit. The next format you can have is an EPUB. Your book will have gone through some sort of converter to create this version. Some typesetting programs do this for you. I know InDesign does, but as I'm not familiar with this process, it's something I outsource. Now, most e-readers will be able to read an EPUB. This includes Kindles. It also includes Kobo, Books, that's spelt with an X, so BOOX, and Nook.
When I was looking through your notes before we recorded, I've not heard of Books. And in my head, I was reading, Kindles, Kobo, and Books. Books. And then as soon as you said spelled with an X, I thought, it's Books, but with an X. But to me, it just looked like Books.
There's other e-readers out there. I'm not limiting it just to these four. There are lots of others, but I would imagine Kindle and Kobo is the leading specific e-readers. And actually Kindles have now come a long way. Like a Kindle now, if you buy a Kindle, you can get them color, whereas before used to be just black and white. And they can actually be like a little mini tablet. So you can do internet searches on them. You can have other apps. Yeah. But Kindles are obviously exclusive to Amazon. Whereas Kobos, I'm not sure where they're exclusive to. And I believe you can read a Kindle edition of your book on a Kobo, I'm pretty sure. But you'll need to just double check all of that. There is a massive selection of e-readers on the market, so go take a look if you're interested in getting one. But you can also read EPUBs by downloading special software on your computer or phone or tablet or iPad. But this isn't the most common way to distribute this file. You usually use an EPUB format to upload to a specific platform, and then they let them distribute the ebook for you. This is like a distributor being like an online bookshop. And obviously the most common example of this is Amazon. I wouldn't recommend selling an EPUB version directly from your website. I've never done it before. I would suggest you upload this EPUB to a distribution site like Amazon or Smashwords, and then they do the distribution for you. So let's take Amazon as an example, as this is probably the most common place most authors want their EPUB file to be uploaded to. But Smashwords is really good too, so do take a look at that. So first of all, you need to make sure that you've got a KDP account set up on Amazon. Now, this is a specific part of the Amazon platform that allows you to upload paperback versions of your book, Kindle versions of your book, etc. If you're already selling your physical book on Amazon, then you probably already have this set up. But if you haven't, then you'll need to create this account. Once you have, you can then upload your EPUB file to Amazon, and then it converts it to a Kindle edition of your book. And then you can sell through that site, and you can sell it alongside your paperback book. Or if you don't have a paperback book up there yet, you can just sell it as a standalone product. It's not a problem. You can set the price, and it's a fairly easy process, but don't forget they will take their cut. But it's a much more profitable way of selling your book, as the royalties are lower to Amazon, as in the royalties are higher to you than the physical book. A quick note, if you choose the KDP Select option, which means a higher royalty, this means you can't sell your ebook version anywhere else. You're basically giving Amazon exclusivity. So you can't upload your book to Smashwords, which is what I mentioned earlier, for example. But you are given fantastic Amazon marketing tools if you do enroll in the KDP Select. So do your research before you upload. I've given a link in the show notes to a really helpful article by Reedsy that explains all of the pros and cons of this option. Now, for those of you not using the KDP Select option, other places then you can upload your ebook to is not only obviously to Amazon, you just don't select that option, but you can then upload it to Smashwords. This is a free distribution site and allows owners of e-readers like the ones that I mentioned before to read your book. They offer a slightly higher royalty for your book, and they deliver to online bookshops like Barnes and Nobles and Google Books, etc. Now, let me just add here, you don't need a Kindle device to read a Kindle editions. I think people think you can only read a Kindle edition if you've got a Kindle, and you don't. I read my Kindles on my iPad. I've just downloaded the Kindle app that you need to get. All you need to do is just download the Kindle Reader app to your computer, tablet, or iPad, and then they will display just like a regular Kindle device will do. So it's really handy. The other format your book can be converted into, and this is a least common one, is a .mobi. Now, this used to be what Amazon needed for their Kindle editions, but they've now switched this over to EPUB. However, there is one exception, as there always is, and that is if you need your book to be a fixed layout. Now, what do I mean by that? When you download a Kindle edition, and I'm using Kindle as the example as it's the most common one, you will notice that when you read it, it'll free flow depending on the size that you're reading it on. So if you're reading it on your phone, for example, you'll probably only be able to see half a page at a time because your phone's really small. Whereas if you read it on your iPad, then you'll be able to see a much bigger selection of that page. Now, of course, this is what reflowable EPUBs allow you to do. It flows to the size of the device. Now, there are some books where you don't want that. I've just converted one last week where it follows a particular design and the writers don't want the book to free flow. They want this book, what's known as fixed format, so that every page is the same, no matter what device you're seeing it on. Now, I believe that the .mobi file format is on the way out in terms of usability across e-platforms, but I know for this type of fixed format, that's what it is. And I would imagine most of our listeners, though, will want the free flow option. So EPUB is definitely the way to go.
And why would you want a fixed format? Is that for books with illustrations or non-fiction diagrams that need to be seen in the context of the main text?
It's more for more graphic books. So, for instance, this fixed format that I'm doing, they've got a double page spread where the graphic goes over 2 pages. Right. And they want you to see the 2 pages side by side.
Yeah. Yeah. So the placing is important when you're looking at the page. I see.
Yeah. But fixed format is more expensive to get converted. So just bear that in mind when you're designing your book. But most of our listeners that are going to be listening to the podcast are doing fiction, maybe business books as well, and they can actually all be free format. It's only if all the specific pages have to be seen because a graphic goes over 2 pages, like I said. I'm actually doing a graphic novel for one of our members in the Facebook group. And she's got this where the graphic, lots of her pages, the graphic goes from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side. And they really need to be seen together because if you saw them separately, it would just look a bit odd. Now, there's a lot to know about this, and I am only skimming the surface, but it is really key to have the correct terminology. An ebook does not mean Kindle. Ebook is any electronic book, as discussed, and a Kindle is the device you read it on. So an ebook really isn't a Kindle.
You do realise, listeners, that we'll be giving you a test at the end.
So just a reminder, if you want your book to be distributed through Amazon, then you'll need an EPUB version, which is then uploaded and distributed by Amazon as a Kindle edition, not a Kindle. It's very easy how you slip into it, though, right? It's like the whole font and typeface.
Yeah,
you've got to get the right terminology because otherwise you could be asking the wrong questions, especially because I get my Kindle editions formatted abroad. If my terminology is not correct, then I might not get what I want at the end. Right, so let's look at other ways you can distribute your book. You can, of course, get your book converted as an audio version, but a bit like the Kindle editions, most people, when talking about audio versions of their book, actually mean an audible version of their book, And these are available, yes, you guessed it, on Amazon. Now, an audio version of your book is quite a bit more complicated than you may think. Let me outline the steps you need to take and then see if this is something that you want to invest in, because a properly produced version isn't going to be cheap at all. So firstly, if your book isn't fiction, then you'll need to get it edited so that it can be read, which means getting rid of things like see below or on the other page or see diagram on page 52, and things like bullet points will need to be signposted as such. Remember, you lose all the visual elements of your book. So you need to have it edited in a way that it can be read, that is then easy for the listeners to follow. Now, if it's fiction, then you don't need to worry about that because you can read it just as it is. Recording. Now, this is where most authors think they can just record their book on their phone or computer, upload it, and there you go. But unfortunately, if you're using Amazon to distribute it, then this isn't the case. If you're uploading to Audible, for instance, then your book will need to meet their quality control, which is very strict. And people, they do have people listening to their books. The sound quality needs to be very high, and you need to upload it in chapters and not in one go.
That sounds like quite a good job.
Yeah.
Listening to books and thinking, oh yeah, that's good quality. Oh, not so good, that one. Oh, I'd quite like that.
Yeah, but I think I would imagine it would get really boring when you're having to literally listen to the book while reading the book, because that's what they do to make sure the content's the same.
Right, yeah.
And your book content has to be the same as your physical book. Like they check if it's more than, I think, 10 or 15% less accurate. It can't be 10% less accurate than your physical book, for instance. Otherwise, they won't let you upload it as the same. Wow. So that's something to know. Editing once recorded. Now, this is probably where the large percentage of the cost comes in for you. So all the pauses, the ums, the breath sounds will need to be edited out. Even if you've hired a professional reader, and again, don't forget that'll be an additional cost, they will need to have it edited once they've finished. As an aside, I've experienced with this as I edit our podcast, and it takes me about an hour to an hour and a half to edit 40 minutes of talking. Now, don't forget, if you're distributing to Audible, then the end user will need to be using a subscription for this service. Don't forget that. It isn't cheap, as it's a monthly subscription for them. I believe you can't buy a one-off Audible book. I think you have to subscribe because you buy credits. And once you've got 20 credits, you can then offset those, I believe. I don't believe you can just go into Audible and buy one book. I don't think.
That's interesting. I've not used it. I do remember that there were, during probably the first lockdown, they were giving out some free. You could listen to some free, but I'm sure that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. So just bear that in mind when you're uploading to Audible. Do your research. Make sure that if you're going to spend 700 quid getting your book edited and used as an Audible, just make sure that your target reader actually listens to audiobooks. Because if you only get two people buying it, you've gone to all that expense and hassle. I mean, I wouldn't do it unless you get lots of requests, is basically what I would do. Now, the Book Refinery actually offers audiobook production service. There you go. I'll pop the link in the show notes. And I've teamed up with Nartin Rose Audiobook Creator to help with this. In fact, I've got my book, my Publishing Your Way to More Clients book, on my to-do list, but it's got to be edited first. And then I need to book time in the recording studio because I'm going to be narrating it. And it's just always falling down on my priority list.
As an aside, being the voice for a book is really fun. Years ago, I was asked to record a collection of stories I'd written, and it was produced as a CD. See, I told you it was years ago because I don't think that even happens anymore. And I recorded some of my own stories for my then publisher to include on their website with other free resources for children during the pandemic lockdowns. And I actually love recording because you get to do all the acting bits without having to learn a word, which is fantastic.
And we've heard you narrate some fabulous stories. Some of the books that we've produced, you've narrated, which have been brilliant.
The little things that are on YouTube now.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah.
We'll put the YouTube link in the show notes for people to go and
okay.
see, because Alexa, you should listen to Alexa doing stories. They are fantastic. Now, once you've got your book edited, if needed, you then obviously you've got to record it into a suitable level and in chapters, and then you can upload it. Now, for Audible, you need to convert your MP3 file into an AAX format. Of course, if you want to sell your book directly, say as an MP3 file, you can, but it will probably be a massive file, and most people don't want to consume their book that way. I mean, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you can't make your book available as a CD if people still listen to CDs, but most people don't. But most people probably want a proper looking audiobook file with the cover, etc. So I would recommend using a platform specifically designed for audiobook distribution. And I'm not just saying Audible's the only one. There are, I believe, Google audiobooks as well. Google Books, I think, and Kobo do audiobooks. So don't just think that Audible's the only way to go. Do your research. Each of these will obviously have their own submission guidelines. So make sure you research them first before you get anything recorded, and have a strategy in place if you're offering this type of edition. The cost of my book, which is about 132 pages, will probably set me back around the £500 mark to get it done, which is a lot. And most of that cost will be in the studio hire and editing at the end.
And obviously, if you're doing the recording, you're not going to be paying a voice artist. So the voice artist cost will be in additional to that £500.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of money. But as audiobooks are so popular now, I do think it's worth looking into. But I think you actually answered that question a bit further back. But it's just about when's the best time to do it. Is it after your physical book or your ebook has been out for a little while to test the market, or would you release an audio version simultaneously? But perhaps, as you say, if you're publishing independently, you might want to ask to wait and find out whether people ask for that format.
I mean, I think a lot of people are consuming more audio content now, which brings me nicely onto my next way of consuming content. But if it's fiction, I would definitely ask your audience and wait until you get lots of requests. Now, there is a way round of getting your non-fiction book or even your fiction book out as an audio version without going through any of this hassle. And that, of course, is releasing it as a podcast. So, Alexa One, you've got a monologue as a podcast, haven't you?
So I wrote a trilogy of murder stories as monologues. Now, there are 2 monologues in each episode, which together tell the whole story. And each individual monologue is performed by a different actor. So they're not books, they're audio dramas, really. But if you wanted to read your own book in installments via a podcast, then there's no reason why you couldn't. The platform I use for the murder monologues and the one that we use for this podcast is Libsyn, but there are various places that do the same thing, Podbean, etc. Once you find your way around, and it's not really difficult, it's just that I find all the techie stuff difficult, but I've got the hang of it now and I can do it quite quickly. You set up your various places where you want to distribute your episodes to, so Apple, Spotify, Audible, etc. Then you simply upload the MP3 or MP4 files to the podcast platform, so Libsyn in our case, and they will then be distributed pretty quickly to all those places that you've set up where people go to listen to podcasts. I usually find once I've pressed publish on ours that they appear within about 20 minutes. The first time you upload something new, it might take a bit longer, but once you're kind of on a roll with it, then they do show up pretty quickly. Now, it's really straightforward. The cost is minimal. We pay a monthly subscription. You get, for that monthly subscription, you get a time allowance. So we do 8 episodes a series, so that means roughly uploading 4 episodes a month. That easily fits within the time allowance that we're given. And then every month, whatever you've uploaded is archived, so it's still available for people to listen to, but it means that your allowance on Libsyn or whichever platform is then renewed. So for the new month, you've got a whole new time allowance. I would say one thing to bear in mind, if it's fiction you've written, you may want to slightly adapt the book so that you're keeping your audience engaged to the max. Now, I know, Alexa, you said you mustn't do that with Audible. They want it to be exactly as the book. But with a podcast, it's your podcast, so you can do what you like. So you can find ways to make it more interesting as an audio experience. So perhaps, where you've got description, that might work brilliantly for the reader because you're setting up the scene and the reader's sitting there reading in a relaxed way. But you might want to take out some of the description for the audio version if it's slowing the pace. Also, if you're able to end each installment on some kind of cliffhanger, and I know that not everyone's fiction is full of cliffhangers, but if you're able to end it with some kind of intrigue, just something that will make listeners want to tune into the next episode, then that's also really good for just keeping that momentum going.
I mean, I'm going to hold my hand up here. I mean, I listen to The Archers. I listen to The Archers. Now, The Archers have been going on for how many years? 50, 60 years?
Must be years and years.
If you can imagine the size of the book of what The Archers would be, I mean, no one would read it, would they? Because it's would be massive. But it's a 15-minute drama. I listen to it when I'm doing the washing up. And there's always a storyline going through. So, you could really have fun with your novel that you've got. You could have fun and produce it as an audio version. That's like you said, if you do 20-minute episodes of your fiction, if it's not going to Audible and it is just a podcast, you could have a little bit of fun with it. You could call it the title of your book, but the audio version or the podcast version, and it might be slightly different.
And I think the creating of it, the actual creating of it would be really fun.
Yeah. So, you could go down the professional studio production route if you wanted to, because people do for podcasts, or you can do it yourself. There's a little bit more flexibility. All you need to do is set up the podcast delivery system, as Alexa has explained, and then market it.
I do find that Twitter is a good place. There are lots of podcast people on Twitter. So if you hashtag podcast and stuff, you can kind of get into that little group. But a little group is a big group. But I know that Twitter is, at the time we were recording this, losing a lot of people to Mastodon. I think that's how you pronounce it, because of the new Twitter owner, whose name I shall not mention. But anyway, let's just say that social media, I think social media is a really good way to market your podcast. And if you start sharing other people's podcasts, they will start sharing yours.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is the second time I've heard of Mastodon and obviously the whole Twitter debacle. And I think it is worth a mention because goodness knows what's going to happen to Twitter. We talk a lot about Twitter on our podcast because I know that's one platform you're on a lot, Alexa. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It would be a shame if Twitter goes for whatever reason.
It would be, because that's my main marketing platform.
Anyway, so there you have it. The 3 different ways you can deliver your book other than in physical form. So you've got ebooks, which includes Kindle editions, not Kindles. 2, an audio version, which includes Audible, and 3, as a podcast. Just remember, whatever format you include, you will need to market it just like you would your physical book. Also, do your research with what each platform requires in terms of file extension, as in EPUB, .mobi, etc. And also whether or not you enroll in any type of program like the aforementioned KDP Select. I love that word, aforementioned.
And it's if you read a lot of Dickens or something.
Yes. Make sure you read the rules regarding that, because they might be really perfect for you if you're only releasing your ebook version on Amazon. But if you want to distribute it to other places, then you can't. Okay, so that's it. Next week, we're going to be talking about pricing and what you should charge for your book.
See, pricing, that's such a tricky one. It's a tricky one in all areas. I find it really tricky in my editing business as well. So that'll be a good one.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about pricing, what you need to be thinking about with pricing, what you can charge, what you can't charge, and everything in between. And don't forget our brand new website, www.thepentapublishedpodcast.com, where you'll find all the show notes. Go visit it. It's absolutely an incredible resource. So that's a bye-bye from me.
And bye-bye from me.